The U.S. military spends a lot of money on defense. For fiscal year 2025, which started in October of 2024 and goes through September, the Pentagon has $895 billion to play with, or put another way, more than the next 9 highest military budgets combined. This large budget allows the United States to experiment with fancy new technologies and weapon systems. These projects vary in size, but none of them are cheap. Take the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program, for example. It is easily one of the most controversial and definitely the most expensive projects in American history, with projections it will cost $2 trillion over its lifetime. While this is the most expensive military project ever, even beating out the Manhattan Project, which developed the atomic bomb and cost only $30 billion in 2023 dollars, it has proven to be mostly successful depending on who you ask. While the F-35 has a mostly happy ending, even with significant early headaches, cost overruns, and performance issues, countless other projects have cost hundreds of millions or billions of dollars and never even saw the light of day. While the exciting history of defense procurement is littered with failure and heartache, it isn't all a complete and total waste. By diving into the Navy's railgun and the Army's seemingly never-ending quest to replace the Paladin that spans literal decades, we will look at some abandoned weapons and how they live on in other programs so that we can co-partner when the Pentagon cancels another multi-billion-dollar project with seemingly nothing to show for it. First, let's break down Barney style how the Pentagon buys stuff.
Well, maybe I can help.
They usually start by standing up committees, councils, and working groups of engineers, experts, and military leaders that evaluate what is needed and why. With a general idea of what they want to buy, a list of requirements is sent out. This is called a request for proposal or an RFP that usually anybody can check out. Interested companies take a look at the RFP, and if they want to compete, they submit their proposal. This process can take years, and since warfare evolves pretty quickly, there's often requirement creep, where the good idea fairy comes along and starts suggesting more and more stuff. A great example of this is the Marine Corps' first failed replacement for the assault amphibious vehicle, the Expeditionary Fighting Vehicle. What was originally planned to be a taxi to send Marines to shore quickly turned into a heavy and unreliable vehicle that provided less logistical support than the AAV. It was so unreliable that the government even had to lower its reliability requirements to one the EFV could meet. It was essentially in development hell, and when combined with a projected cost of $15 billion, it's no wonder it was canceled in 2011. A chief warrant officer in my first unit, 1st LAR, was actually sent to this program in 2011, right before it was canceled. If you're out there, Chief Warrant Officer Weaver, it wasn't your fault. This fumble wasn't a complete loss, though. With those expensive lessons learned, the Corps put together the Amphibious Combat Vehicle program, and Marines are now rolling around in those. As a result, though, trackers can no longer say yacht-yahs all the time, so have fun on wheels like everyone else, nerds.
Where are they?
With that excitement out of the way, let's talk about the Navy's Railgun project, started in 2006 as the Electromagnetic Laboratory Railgun. The Navy wanted a long-range, powerful, accurate, and relatively cheap weapon to fire. As we all know, precision munitions like standard missiles are expensive and require dedicated launch cells, which take up valuable space on a ship. The Navy's 5-inch Mark 45 guns are a nice compromise, having a relatively high rate of fire and are pretty efficient in the space front, but they lack range, topping out at 20 miles, so the Navy went shopping. In 2010, BAE Systems produced a railgun that had 33 megajoules of energy with a range of 100 nautical miles. That sounds like a lot, but 33 megajoules is just 0.033 gigawatts, far short of the 1.21 gigawatts that Marty McFly and Doc Brown needed to travel through time. With the projectile leaving the barrel at 7.5 times the speed of sound, it would also be really hard to intercept. This would have complemented those expensive missiles as a much cheaper option with a decent range, which was about half of the SM-6. While this sounds like a good enough reason to keep pushing the envelope, the technology was simply not there. First of all, you'd need a huge power reserve to effectively run the railgun, And the only ships that could have done this without major retrofits were the Zumwalt-class destroyers. While we're on it, the Zumwalt destroyers were nearly a console project all their own because out of the 32 planned, only 3 were built. Anyway, energy wasn't its only problem. It also suffered from a poor rate of fire. The Mark 45 5-inch gun can send 16 to 20 rounds per minute downrange, while the railgun was only ever projected to have a rate of fire of 10. This was only a projection though, since there wasn't a continuous rate of fire test, so it could have been even lower, but we will never know. The barrel was also pretty terrible, needing to be replaced or refurbished every 12 to 24 shots, while a normal gun barrel would last around 600. When it fired, there was also an electromagnetic force that came from the rails, which could damage other electronic systems on the ship. Typically, you want to avoid self-sabotage, especially in warfare. The rails were also very susceptible to damage. As you can imagine, firing it was an extremely violent affair because of the friction on the rails after shooting the projectile at such high speeds. Once the rails were damaged, it became inaccurate. So not only was the thing nearly impossible to power, the barrel didn't last long, it wasn't accurate, and it could damage the ship it was firing from. All of these issues essentially canceled out any advantage it had over traditional systems and ultimately led to its demise in 2021. In total, the Navy spent $500 million and over a decade of research on the project before deciding to end it. While the Navy has stated it would consider looking into railguns in the future, it was simply ahead of its time. Despite the railgun being a failure, for now, its legacy lives on as its ammunition is being revitalized as the Hypervelocity Projectile, or HVP. This projectile, like the railgun, is manufactured by BAE Systems. Through the Navy's Major Caliber Anti-Drone Air Program, or MADCAP for short, they plan on retrofitting that ammunition to be used in the Mark 45 5-inch naval guns to destroy incoming drones and missiles. Even though the HVP is being fired from a traditional gunpowder system, it can still reach speeds of about Mach 3, about twice the speed of traditional shells. This push to bring the HVP on board Navy ships has only grown stronger thanks to the combat in the Red Sea. The US Navy has been involved in the most sustained combat that they've seen since World War II as they battle missiles and drones launched by Houthi rebels in Yemen, and as we've reported, this is cutting deep into ordnance stockpiles. During recent clashes, the 5-inch guns were even used to take out incoming drones, which at least proves out the idea for the HVP to do this from ships. The hypervelocity projectile would become a part of a layered missile defense system and provide significant cost savings. Last year, the United States spent an estimated $1 billion fighting the Houthis, or put another way, about 5% of Yemen's entire GDP. Missiles like the Standard Missile, the Evolved Sea Sparrow missile, and the Rolling Airframe missile cost millions and are frankly overkill for the threats the Navy is facing from the Houthis, which are often slower moving drones and anti-ship ballistic missiles. Now, of course, there is always the consideration of the cost if one of those enemy missiles scores a hit and damages the ship and kills sailors, but dollar for dollar, the Houthis are making a pretty good trade. For the low cost of just $86,000 per round, the Navy could effectively take out less sophisticated missiles and drones using existing weapons and not have to spend $15 million to do it. Those fancy missiles could then be used for higher value targets like the Houthis' F-5 Tiger jets from the 1960s. Soon we may be shooting Mach 3 Freedom projectiles at those who dare to try to touch our boats, all thanks to the failed railgun. The Navy isn't the only one getting the hypervelocity projectile. The Army wants a piece too. In 2020, the M109A6 Paladin, which is not a tank even though it is tank-shaped, successfully shot down a target drone with the HVP, setting the groundwork for the Multi-Domain Artillery Cannon, or MDAC, meant primarily to deal with aerial problems. This 105mm wheeled self-propelled artillery is designed around the HVP. As per the contract, the Army envisions this system to, quote, protect fixed and semi-fixed locations against unmanned aerial systems, cruise missiles, fixed-wing, rotary wing, and other advanced air and missile threats, unquote. We come back once again to cost. Currently, the Army relies primarily on Stingers, Patriot systems, and the Phalanx close-in weapon systems to defeat things like low-flying aircraft, UAVs, and rockets and missiles. These cost hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars to fire each time, and they aren't too great against multiple threats coming at the same time. If you have 2 dozen drones heading your way, you might get a handful of them with the current defenses, but a few could get through, and any follow up attack could be even more difficult to defend against, especially if you run out of those expensive missiles. With that in mind, the MDAX is slated for trials in 2028 with a full MDAX battery and no less than 144 hypervelocity projectiles to be delivered. For now, anyway. The HVP isn't the only piece of the MDAX to come from a failed program. The Army has tried a few times to replace the Paladin. One such project was the XM 2001 Crusader. The Crusader was designed around a hypothetical war with the Soviet Union, and this shows in its design. Compared to the Paladin, it had better armor, a faster rate of fire thanks to an autoloader, and a better fire control system that allowed multiple rounds to be fired so they would impact all at the same time. While it had these advantages, it was also almost 20 tons heavier. This came at a time when the Army was reorganizing to create a more nimble fighting force that could be rapidly deployed across the globe, which was not the Crusader's strong point. This was also during the beginnings of the War on Terror, and since it was irregular in nature, a new heavily armored self-propelled artillery piece was not needed. So, after spending about $2 billion, the Crusader was canceled in 2022. The Army's other attempt to replace the Paladin was the XM-1203 non-line of sight cannon, or the NLOSC, or NLOSC, I really don't know. The NLOSC was a part of the larger future combat systems and took a lot of the lessons learned from the Crusader. It would have been similar in size to the Paladin, but way more advanced, featuring the autoloader from the Crusader, a networked fire control unit for better accuracy, and a crew size of just 2. While it was very advanced, it had the misfortune of being part of the Future Combat Systems project, which was an attempt to make all of the fighting vehicles share a common chassis, a pretty lofty goal. After spending $19 billion on the weapon, it was canceled in 2009. But just like the railgun, these failures were just opportunities to make something else better. Currently, the Army is using the latest and greatest version of the M109, the A7. According to the Army, the A7 has improved firing operations thanks to the XM-1203's electric drives. These replaced the old hydraulic system and gave the A7 Paladin more consistent ramming of the round, leading to consistent muzzle velocities, improved accuracy, and responsiveness. With any luck, lessons learned from the failures of the Crusader and XM-1203 will allow the MDAX to succeed because troops desperately need this capability to defend themselves against present-day threats. So yeah, it always sucks to see another couple billion get wasted on a project that will wind up as some museum piece, looking at you M10 Booker, or at the very least an obscure Wikipedia page. But if you're trying to produce cutting-edge technologies, inevitably some just won't work out. They may seem like a waste of money at the time, and to be fair, most of them are 100% a complete waste of money, but at least some can have their purposes. Who knows, maybe we can even take the railgun and put it on an M10 Booker. This script was written by David Caplan and the video was edited by Savvy. I'm Kyle, and you are all dismissed. See you next time.